good. Ready, begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, all directors are present. Everyone is in person and Director Johnson is on Zoom. Approval of the agenda. Mr. Barks, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda tonight.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor of the motion to approve the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Public comment. Ms. Ward, are there any members of the public here for public comment?
Yes, so we have two members in the audience. Do you have a public comment? They have none. On Zoom, we have two. We have Tracy. I don't see a last name. Tracy, do you have a public comment?
Hello, everybody. This is Battalion Chief Steve Tracy with County Fire. Don't have any comments at this time.
All right, thank you. And Cheryl Roden.
Hi, item 16.
And that is it.
All right, thank you. Are there any community reports?
It looks like we have County Fire on Zoom.
All right.
Hi, everybody. This is, this is Steve Tracy, Battalion Chief for Battalion 8 for County Fire. Just to report a couple things. It's been fairly slow in the area for calls for service, which is a good thing. In the next several months, we'll be preparing ourselves for what hopes to be a slow wildland season, but it is our annual training. So we will be out in the community doing some community risk assessments, and you'll probably see several of our engine companies doing some wildland preparedness training probably through the end of April, beginning of May. And unless there's any questions, that's all I have to report at this time.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? No. All right, thank you so much. All right, any other community reports?
I see none on Zoom and no one in person.
All right, so moving on to number 3, consent items. Does anyone have any items they would like to pull?
I'll move the items.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent items?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Number 4, we had no matters removed from consent items. So we go to number 5, presentations. Mr. Bartz.
Thank you, Madam President. We have Chris Collier here tonight to talk about the park survey that we recently had completed.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Directors. Good to see you all in person. It's worked out that to be here to present this information. Put the PowerPoint up, and we'll walk through the results of our survey.
Are you going to share?
So the survey is in draft. Essentially, if there are any questions or need additional clarifications, I'm happy to revise the final report and send that in as a final once we're through tonight. But we did go in the field from January 21st to February 2nd. It's a little longer than we normally would do a survey, but in order to get the 400 responses of our likely voters, we ended up with 423 actually. And it just took a little bit longer. We made a second pass, if you will, of the file to get people to complete. But the data still in that as a 4.8% margin of error, plus or minus. So go ahead. Yep. So to frame the research, as we talked we met in person, the big 3 things that we're accomplishing here. What is the state of the district? in terms of right track, wrong track, some of the issues and services that you provide. What does the community know about the park expansion? What are their priorities? And then the big question is the community willing to pay for the park expansion? And how about if we add the pool? And that's using the data that we received from your staff in terms of the costs related to it and how we put that in the survey. Next slide. So we're going to dive right into results. And boy, my eyes are bad. It may be helpful, actually, if I can pull my computer up and scroll along with you, just because I can't read them from here and I don't have it memorized. Thank you.
You can maybe on these computers.
Yeah, I can fix the view.
Thank you.
Make it a little bigger.
Thank you.
A little farther away than I expected. Sorry about that.
Should it be better if I share my screen?
We can try that. Let me connect and download it real quick. Just take a second. But the first slide, the first two questions, we asked what the most important local issues were to folks. And in doing so, we had the same list of issues in the first question and the second question. We stacked them on top of each other. You could see how what was really, at the heart of folks. They've said homelessness was the most important issue, but second to me is crime, or is illegal cannabis was the number one. The big takeaway for your board is one of those things that came out of our interview is that the three biggest issues, according to how likely voters feel in your community, are things that are out of your control. That was something that we thought would be the case, but we asked that to determine, what are the things in your control versus out of your control. And those three issues, crime, homelessness, and illegal cannabis use, growing, are the three that popped up first. Go ahead to the next slide, and I'm pulling this up so that I can read. All right, I can see numbers now. In question 3, we asked the overall direction of the district, how people think things are going. And there was nothing decisive here. It's a mixed bag. You had just over a third, 37%, say that things were very much on the right track or somewhat on the right track. There were only 5% that said that things were really, really good, which maybe there's some room for improvement there. But in general, it was split evenly, almost about a third between those that thought things were going well, things that could be better, and folks that just didn't really have an opinion on that question. You do these surveys in a lot of different communities, and you find that usually it sticks out one way or the other. So it's just there's just a diversity of opinions. Next slide. On the next slide, we looked at the importance of the various services the district provides. And you can see in the red at the top, the first column is water. 60% of the folks, we scaled this 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest level of importance and 5 being the highest. Water services, the most important thing to your constituents. Then waste following in, and then parks after that. But one thing you do look at is those people were at least about 80% of in all three categories thought it was a 3 or higher. It's not that one is really far out of the others, but people just don't think that water is the most important service you provide. Next slide. So question 7, we asked how often community members use the parks system. 63.6% of respondents utilize the parks at least monthly. I thought that was a good stat. That was higher than what I expected, actually. In terms of regular park users, we did this in the crosstabs. 50.4% have young school-age children, and only 16.7% don't have children. So the majority of users of your park are folks with kids. People who aren't using the park, 66.8% don't have kids. So that was the biggest thing out of all the demographics we compared this to. Whether or not you had children was the largest driver of whether or not you use the parks. Next slide. So question 8 and 9, I put them side by side so you can see how this information came about. So first is question 8. How aware are you of what's going on with the potential for the expansion of Phelan Community Park? Very low percentage folks had participated in public meetings, but there were a few. Most fell in the somewhat aware of the expansion or aware of the expansion being discussed, but don't know anymore. And then the 45% not heard of or weren't sure. And you look at where folks were getting the information, we didn't take the people that said they weren't sure, not heard of out of that, right? We just looked at asked the same question again, but where did you get your information? You can see that 38% said they had not heard of or weren't sure. So there were a few people that may have heard something about it, but just decided not to say anything about that. We saw that in the tabs. But essentially, the largest driver of how people are hearing about this is social media. And that was particularly true. We don't have a chart to show that, but in those that are aware of the expansion but being discussed, don't know more, it's the third of the red bars. That was your highest correlation of the social media group. It was much higher than that 31%. It was closer to 55% of folks that in that category had heard something from social media. Board office and attending community meetings and being low, but surprising number of people on the website and local newspaper to getting their information. Any questions? All right, next slide. This was interesting, and this mirrors the conversation we had when I spoke to you via Zoom when you were having your special hearing on what folks thought was important. The red and the yellow bars combined are the very important and somewhat important responses of the pool of the folks that were surveyed. And so you can see that the things that stand out still, this didn't change. It changed a few percentage points from when we had the previous discussion, when we got our additional data. But the expanded playground, the events plaza, and the sports fields were the 3 highest responses. But it shows you how they stacked up comparatively. So it's easy way to see that visually. Questions? All right. So question 11, we've educated people on all the things that are going to be in the expansion. We did not yet introduce cost to them. This is where this starts getting interesting. So the respondents, 65.4% said, yes, we strongly support the expansion of the park. 20.5% say we somewhat support it. So combined, you're really high up there, and over 85% of folks saying, yes, this is a great idea. But then we introduce costs and things that are more interesting. Before we do that, though, and we ask the questions this way, and when we were having the discussion about the survey in general, I was asked a question about, well, why don't we tell them how much it's going to cost before we go and talk about the pool? And the reason we did it this way is we wanted people to just think about the park and the pool without having any money attached to it. Well, after this slide, we'll get into where I put those things side by side so we can see how people fared, one with the pool or the expansion, and then with the expansion with the cost attached. But in question 12, we asked how, if we were to add the indoor community pool, where respondents were more likely to support the expansion. And reality is people were much more likely to support the expansion would have had the pool. So one of the things you do in an election is you always look at who moves in these surveys, right? And what's most interesting to me is the crosstab of those who were negative or undecided about the park expansion. Look, you had 85% of people saying, yeah, it's a great idea. Well, that other 15%, what made them tick? What made them move? And what was interesting is when you add the pool, 57.8% went from opposition or undecided to support, and only 12.6% switched from support to oppose. And so, you're talking just over 4 times folks that are moving more in the positive direction than negative there. So people want the pool. Then we start talking about money.
Yeah, but
as the cost of the expansion increased to include the community pool, support for the parcel tax decreased overall. Well, basically, what you're looking at is 29.2% and the yes for sure dropped to 26. 26.4% dropped to 20.7. 13.5% on probably no went up to 16.4, and the no for sure jumped from 19.5 to 25.1. The undecideds only moved 0.4. So the people that were, and in the crosstabs, it was very highly correlated. The people that were undecided initially were still undecided after they talked about money. They're just not sure what they want to do. So the movement was really within people going yes to, oh, wait, no. And so that's what we see. And this is just talking about the expansion. I'm sorry.
I'm confused.
Yes.
It seems reversed with what you're saying. Yeah. So in the original one, there was 85% positive for park expansion.
Yes.
When you add the pool support, it is 55%.
The question was framed as more likely to support. So if you add the pool, would you be more likely to support or the same? So
it went down to 50.
No.
No, that's not the same question. Okay.
Yeah, the questions are slightly different. I understand what you're thinking.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, so this is how much will change. We looked at the delta there. And in this question, we looked at the support of the measures overall comparing to where people were. If you add the tax, the first one is 0.2 plus a 26.4. I explained the slide incorrectly. I'm sorry. It's been a long day of driving. If you combine the red bars, it shows you where people were on question 13, which is we have a park. This is what it costs to expand it. What do you think? And you'll see that is just under 50 or just over 50% at 54.6%, right? But then you add the pool with the higher dollar amount and it drops to 46.7% in support. And I should frame all of this, and I'll say this at the end as well, that this is a parcel tax, which carries a higher threshold for approval because you're using the funds, and there may be a way, and I'm not a lawyer, so I advise having that discussion, but generally parcel taxes are 2/3 for a specific project like this. If you're going to say let's raise a parcel tax for the good of the district, there's typically a lower threshold. But when you're saying we want to raise money to build a park under Prop 13, there's a 2/3 threshold. So you're far below that in terms of the support you have. This is where I was explaining the previous slide incorrectly. This is what I wanted to talk about. So question 11, do you support the park? This is that 85%, right? The two red bars in the first two columns. Then you drop down to that 54% immediately. So you lose 30% as soon as you start talking about money. The folks that say, yeah, I support it, but I don't want to pay for it. And you watch the opposition, the yellow bars, go from somewhat opposed, went up 12%, and then the strongly opposed went up just over 17%. So you see a lot of moving from that as soon as you introduce the cost element. Same thing, 12 and 14. Question 12 was what do you think about the pool? And then comparing that to the tax, you see the same situation where you have support for the pool, and then you see it drop off with the tax included. So we look at the overall payment commitment, right? 30% are still undecided. It's been tracking within the margin of error the entire survey of folks just really not sure how they feel about it. First one, I'm not willing to pay anything new to expand the park or build the community pool. It's 33.5%. People don't want to do anything. I'm willing to pay $95 a year or $7.91 a month per parcel to expand the park, but I'm not willing to pay additional to build the pool. 17.2%. And I'm willing to pay $135 a year, $11.25 a month per parcel to both expand the park and build the community pool. And that's only at 35.9%. So I did a little bit of math. And the reality is the likely voters do not support the additional cost to add the pool, falls short of the 2/3 threshold. And the one thing, and this was part of the discussion we had a few weeks ago when we looked at the partials. I looked at the crosstab, right? There's a 95.1% overlap between the people who are willing to pay for the park expansion without the pool and the people who answered to the willing to pay $135 a year, right? So the people who are, you can essentially add the two together to get where you are on just the park. Well, add the two at a 95.1% multiplier, which basically means you're at 51.28%. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We looked at the numbers and mapped that out, and you're just over 50. You're still far short of the 2/3 required for the parcel tax specific for the project. But so in general, survey respondents are prioritizing the playground expansion, event space, and sports facilities. I stopped short of writing down the idea that people want to come together and do stuff together, because the other things that scored lowest, if you look at the equestrian and the skate park, were things that are more very activity specific rather than multi-use spaces. Survey respondents supported expanding the park, but are less enthusiastic about paying for it. And then support for the park expansion jumps with the addition of the pool, but respondents are less enthusiastic about paying the higher parcel tax for the pool. Just to show you some demographics, remember, this is not necessarily the demographics of your district. This is demographics of likely voters, which we pulled from the voter file based on performance in previous elections. And we used an algorithm approach to determine those who are newly registered to vote and how they would potentially vote based on, for example, you move here from another place, your voter history is part of the larger file. We're able to find out if you're likely to vote. So we basically use that math to figure out our pool of likely voters, and this is the demographics. The second slide of demographics related to residency skews a little bit heavy on the homeowner side compared to the community, but waiting for that would have thrown off some of our other metrics, which I think are more important. Shows the breakdown by community, and then how long folks have been in the community. This definitely was a homeowners who had been in the community a long time are definitely the folks who are the voters in this district. So with that, that's the last slide on this presentation. There were 400 pages of crosstabs, and I've reviewed most of them in great detail, and we'll be providing that as necessary. But if there's any questions, I can look that up, or we can get into the weeds and send it back.
All right. Do any of the board members have any questions? Mark? Oh, Kathy?
Yeah, I had one. I remember you'd said something in the beginning, but was there a demographics of the people who filled out the survey?
Yeah.
And a percentage of what I just didn't have kids and who did have kids. What was the percent?
So on slide 17, you want to pull that back up, 43.8% have no children, 5.6% have infants or toddlers, 22.6% have young school-age kids, 10% have older school-age kids, and 18% have adult children. And it's the third demographic slide or pie chart with the word children above it.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah, I was just I was trying to add up the numbers who didn't have 18 or less, and who had or didn't have children or were adult children. The percentage. So.
All right, Kathy, did you have any questions?
I did. So they are in favor of a park expansion, correct? But not paying for a pool. That is correct.
Or paying for the park expansion.
Okay. Or paying for the park expansion.
And to say that they aren't in favor of it, to get the exact numbers, it's over 50%, but it's not high enough to meet the threshold required for the parcel tax.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
So you could say the community does support it, but
Sure.
it doesn't support it at the level necessary to
Right,
further.
which is, yeah.
All right, Deborah, did you have any questions?
No, they were asked, all right. They got to them.
All right.
Thank you.
Charlie, did you have any questions?
Yes, if you, Chris, if you could go back to slide 6, please.
6?
Yes, slide 6.
Yep. The usage frequency.
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm reading this right, because I want to make sure the colors, because you said 63% use the park at least once a month. I think you added the wrong numbers, because the dark orange is a few times a year. The weekly and monthly is more like 31%.
I'll double check that. It is very possible I transcribed the number on the chart incorrectly, but I wrote that down after looking at the actual printout I got. So I know that 66% is correct. I think I just need to adapt the chart. And thank you for catching it.
Yeah. I mean, I would be stunned if 63% of the people use it once a month. That would be an amazing number. I mean, when you consider we're of course, we have a lot of people in town, but of the survey people, that just seems way, way too high.
It's
If you could check that number and let us know, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd also add there's some inherent biases in asking people if they do something that sounds good. If I asked the general public in a survey question, how often do you exercise? How often do you eat healthy?
Mhm.
How often do you, there's going to be a little bit of bias.
That's on fire, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand that.
But I'll double check that and get that back.
I'd appreciate it because the numbers just don't look right. On slide 8, maybe I'm just being too nitpicky, but it seems like these should add up to 100% and they don't. So if you could just double check that too. Some of them do, but some of them don't. I'm being picky and I appreciate that. So.
And that's quite possible because some answers or some questions had some people didn't respond to every single one. So you can leave things blank on the survey. So I'll go back and double check the raw data, but there are some discrepancies where not everything's going to add up to 100% because that's just the way the tabs work.
Yeah, I don't want you to have to go back to it, but slide 4, you don't have to go back to it on your presentation. I have it here on my screen, on my second screen. But on slide 4, it's basically a third. A third think we're on the right track, a third not, and a third don't know anything. I mean, to me as a director, it seems like to me that we're not getting the word out. There's a communication problem, and I know staff is probably cringing when I say that. And I know that we're doing everything and we can. We've got social media stuff, we've got press releases, we've got the webpage and all that sort of stuff. But clearly, if 32% of the people think we're on the wrong track, then we've got and 60. If you add the other 31% who don't know anything, I'm a little bit concerned about how much information is getting out to our constituents and our customers. The only other comment I would say is that, and by the way, this is not a surprise to me. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody on the board, really. Everybody wants to park, but nobody wants to pay for it. We've been saying that for 2 years now. Chris, I appreciate your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I did have one question. I know you said that the 473 were random. 423, sorry. But I did notice that the Phelan part of the pie was much larger than the Pinion Hills part of the pie.
That's correct.
So
people are.
So first it's population, and I can go back and get numbers that I haven't accessible. Second is response rates, which I weight things for age and age, gender, and turnout to make sure that everyone that shows up on the survey is a likely voter and all that. When we get into geography in a smaller community, and this is, believe it or not, a smaller community in terms of survey size compared to like a supervisorial district here in San Bernardino County, it gets kind of hard to get that weighting exact because it will throw off everything else. So that's why it is skewing the way it is.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Do we have any questions from the public in person?
Yes, I do.
Miss Roden, give me just 1 second. There's someone inside the building. Did you have a question?
Yes.
About this item?
First of all, you guys have been doing the park for about a year or so. I have been doing surveys and studies through the schools, parents for larger than that region. For newcomers who have only been here 1 year who use this park. Now they have moved the park expansion from large to a smaller scale. And what I found is most people find this larger scale. They don't want that because they don't want more people from outside the community coming in. The pool, they asked for a splash park. Spoke to the superintendent of this school district and he said, not really, because when water comes up, if the parents aren't washing, there can be choking hazards. Okay. So maybe no pool, no water park that was on their first large expansion. The shorter one that I did not see on there any differentiations or what in mind that they have, their first pictures or their current pictures of what the park is. So that would change this. And then the high school has added after school programs. And when I spoke to the superintendent of the school district, he said, no, we've always had them there. But when I took my son up there, we found more kids and they're more knowledge and more teachers started participating like in indoor, the little volleyball thing, table ping pong. Okay, so they started this, but they're saying they would like somewhere else also for the kids to go. But now, if you look, there's a lot of kids there after school that looks like during school, so they want the park here with these things from the teachers also. And that's not on your survey, you're going to survey teachers. So the park needs to be here, but without the pool or water supplies, and most of these were play. The parents who wanted the pool don't mind driving out to the other ones. There's one in Hesperia, Apple Valley, and Fontana, but they say they only use it less than days.
Thank you. And I'll address one of the points you brought up about things that are in the survey and how this was designed. You know, the task I had was to design a survey that would determine whether or not the voters that are likely to show up for a parcel tax will be willing to, after understanding what was in the design that the district had given me, whether or not they were willing to pay for it at the rates that were described.
These people and usage show that if they $11.26, a lot of people were saying yes. Here, they says, yeah, if it costs me $10, it's just coming out anonymous numbers out of their head up to $15. Now, your next number up was $16.25. Well, that's their height from different people with businesses that have children. And you're going $1.25, 6 more, so they're like, on the border, do I do that $1.26 more than my maximum? So it can be somewhere in the 10 to 15. But like he was redoing the park down to a sizable amount where that would fit. Then it would work in cohesion.
And I'd defer the park design question to the board because that's ultimately their decision. I would.
Oh, the design is because the amount of buildings, and that is the capsules. They had a big theater, outdoor theater. They indoor, and they changed it to outdoor. That lowers the taxes. The buildings, they have 3. They put it down to 2 with the larger room. So things that would be to the tax property taxes lower.
And I'd also like
Chris, I'm going to cut you off there. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for your comments, but we're at our time limit. So I'm going to move on to anyone on Zoom that has any questions on item number 5.
I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Roden.
Hi, yeah, a couple questions for Chris, I think. When you drew your likely voters, were those voters from those who voted in the CSD district who voted for president, or those who voted in the CSD in the last election who actually voted for the CSD candidates?
We don't have access to the data, even at the county file, on who fills out what items. If you pull a ballot and you mark something on the ballot and you turn it in, you're considered someone who voted in that election. I don't know which questions on that ballot, be it president, all the way down to CSD or school board, that you voted on. That's not data that's publicly available for survey work or for anyone else. That's part of keeping ballots secret. And unfortunately, I have access to determine whether or not you voted in that election or not.
Okay, and on relative to questions 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, have you done crosstabs for those who answered don't get service?
I did look at that. Yeah, we're looking at 4, 5, and 6 for those that didn't get service and what that importance was. You'll notice that here I dropped them from the chart up here. I'm looking at it. I'm sorry. On questions 4, 5, and 6, it's slide 5, the stacked where you had the red at the top for what was the most important. I dropped the not have service from there, so you can see just how those who answer the question who do have each other.
Right. I'm interested in. No, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm interested in the percentage of the respondents. And if you may not have that tonight. And let me tell you why I raised it. Because instead of asking in the instance of water if someone was a CSD customer or a Sheep Creek customer, they could answer don't have service. Likewise, for those in the waste question, there was either, they couldn't answer I have CR&R or I go to the dump. And if the percentages of don't get service are comparable, to the numbers that are CSD, then they're usable, somewhat usable. If not, those responses are going to be really shaded because you've got almost going on 50%, I think, of people who don't use CNR now, if that point makes sense. So I'm trying to figure out the best way for the board to be able and the staff to be able to utilize the information on those questions. And also, if you can cross-tab "don't get service" to question 3 for them at some point, you may get slightly different percentages if a large number of those don't use service for water. And does that make sense?
It does. Those crosstabs exist in the large crosstab document. I'm happy to run those numbers if that's what the board would like me to do. I would just like to comment on the importance of the district services. The reason that we set this up the way we did, it wasn't necessarily to find out in the high level of detail what somebody cares about with water versus or about which water service they get. What I was trying to determine and what we were trying to show is, because this is a survey about parks, it's a survey about how much people care about parks. And what I did look at was for folks that thought that parks were important versus not very important, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there, and how that cross-tab throughout the entire survey, particularly those that answered those questions 11, 12, 13, and 14 about support and payment. I was trying to compare water to parks to waste in general on a self-reported basis. And it shows us very clearly, water's most important, then waste, then parks. And, there was, I'm recalling from memory, I believe it's 15% or less in the do not get service categories that was dropped off of each of those 3. I can confirm that specifically. It's in the crosstab document. But my point was, I wanted to see, okay, how do parks stack up against water and waste? And then when people care about parks or don't care about parks, how do they respond differently to the money questions and to the support questions? And to be honest, after going through all of that, there was nothing statistically significant that popped out. We did it because if there was something that popped out, we'd be reporting on it to say, this is something that is really important, that drives the process, but nothing drove the process.
Right.
I understand. Thank you on that. And then just a comment. I suppose the bad news is that there's not stronger support for a parcel tax. And that, I think, is really understandable in the climate that we're in. We're coming out of a pandemic. The economy is starting to recover, but we still have high unemployment and inflation, and the high desert itself has higher unemployment than other areas. So I think the attitudes that were displayed there are more than understandable. And it doesn't mean that because you're going to start with phase 1 with the loan, it doesn't mean you can't come back and revisit the question for a future phase when things have turned around for the country and for our little community. So I just wanted to put that perspective out there as you deliberate on your next steps.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Any other questions?
Just one quick question. Your survey is random, almost random, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we randomize
and I'm not questioning it, which makes total sense. Thank you.
Well, with the caveat that the total pool of people we pick from is not anything. It starts with likely voters and then we randomize.
Exactly. So it doesn't matter where they live and what service they get because they all use the park anyway.
I'm sorry, Charlie, did you have a question?
No.
Okay.
I was just mumbling to myself.
Okay, no problem. Chris, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Great to see you all. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a safe drive.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to number 6, discussion and possible adoption of resolution number 2022-06, establishing a cash handling policy. Mr. Bartz.
Thank you. The purpose of this policy is to solidify and formalize a district cash handling policy that will establish best practices and standards to be applied by all employees that have authority to handle cash. Employees that have been authorized to receive district cash share the stewardship of financial assets for the district. The cash handling policy is designed to set forth standard procedures for employees in the handling, deposit, and safekeeping of district cash. At the February 2nd, 2022 board meeting, the board requested to review the district's cash handling policy. District staff has reviewed the policy and suggests minor modifications as indicated in red line format on the attached policy. The policy was initially adopted on November 6th, 2013, and amended on November 19, 2014, and again on April 20th, 2016. The main changes suggested are replacing cash bag with cash box to reflect the current use of cash boxes instead of cash bags. Removing traveler's checks from the type of checks accepted. I'm not even sure you can still get those. And including the automated phone payment option as a method of utilizing a credit card. So with that, you have in your board package, the red line version, you can see the changes along with other minor changes in that. And the staff's recommendation is for the board to adopt resolution number 2022-6, establishing a cash handling policy.
All right. Thank you very much. Deborah, do you have any questions?
No, the cleanup looks really nice, including the spelling differences and stuff like that. I like that. I wouldn't even notice spelling differences.
It made it for a number of years and then
Yeah.
without any comments.
I wouldn't have even noticed them if you guys hadn't corrected them. So thank you.
All right. Mark, any questions?
No, looks good.
All right. Kathy? Charlie, any questions?
No, I would move approval of staff recommendation.
I'll second that.
All right.
Well, if you have comments, you can certainly make them.
Oh, no, it's okay. That's totally fine. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. All right, 6B, discussion and possible action regarding the 2021-2022 reserve schedule. Mr. Bartz.
Thank you. Each year, the board is to consider and approve the reserve schedule for that year after the final audit is approved for the prior year, generally in January of each year. The reserves policy was established by the board after a series of workshops in 2012. Modifications were made to the policy in 2016 and in 2020. The current resolution was adopted by the board on February 5th, 2020. And we've attached the reserve schedule for 2021 and 22 for your consideration. And staff's recommendation is that the board approve the 2021-2022 reserve schedule in compliance with resolution number 2020-02 reserves policy.
All right, we'll start with Charlie this time. Any questions?
No, the only comment, I just want to remind the board, and I know y'all are aware of it, but just for the record, I want to make sure everybody realizes that in item 1B and 1C, we're just a shade under $3 million below our policy. So we made that decision consciously. I understand that, but I think it's important every once in a while we remind ourselves that we're still just about 2.8 or $2.9 million below our policy levels. That's all.
All right, Kathy? Mark?
Just for my own refresher, this was adjusted the last time that Habib did the rate study, correct?
That is correct.
And so the different 1A through D, they were adjusted just a year ago, a little over a year ago, right?
The amounts were, yeah. They're
Well, the rate stabilization that was put in, which we didn't have before. So that I thought we had just done that. Yeah, that's all I had. Thanks.
Okay, Deborah?
No questions.
All right, and I have no questions.
Sorry. I'll make a motion.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion to pass 2022-06, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the motion passes. All right, moving on to 6C, discussion and possible action regarding unclaimed funds. Mr. Bartz.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Ward is going to take this item.
All right. Okay.
Well, it's been a minute since we've had enough unclaimed funds sufficient enough to warrant publishing expenses. It's part of the process that is required in order for the district to remove these balances from its books. That's the short version of this. So we have a list attached. We have made several efforts to try and reach these individuals to make sure that they get the money owing to them. Typically, these are refund checks. We've been unsuccessful in that. And so staff is requesting that we can follow the legal process to begin publication of these funds. And if they are not claimed, then we would be moving them off of our financials. So they will be transferred into the general fund, our government fund. And so with that, staff recommends for the board to authorize the publication of a notice of unclaimed funds and to transfer any unclaimed funds by the expiration date listed in the notice from the unclaimed liability account to the district's general fund, whereby they will become the property of the district.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions? We'll start with Kathy.
So it's $175 to publish it?
Yes, roughly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's expensive to publish
More than
things
that,
now.
it's less money that we're going to collect.
Yeah, so if nobody approximately in unclaimed funds. So, but the most important thing is it allows us to get some of these balances that have been
Yeah.
on our books there for a long time off of them.
Right.
Okay. Mark, any questions?
No, that looks
Pretty straightforward.
pretty straightforward.
Deborah,
No question.
All right.
Straightforward.
Charlie, any questions?
No, the only comment is John and Kathy Fay are no longer on the planet, so
I was gonna say, and
they're not.
Thatchers, I know.
The Thatchers moved away.
Yeah, but I've got their number.
Give them a phone call, please.
I'll move approval of staff recommendation.
I'll second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? And the motion passes. I'm sorry, Ms. Roden, I believe you said you had a comment on 6C.
No, on the minutes item.
On the what?
The minutes.
Item 6E, I believe is
Oh,
what she's
E.
referring to.
Sorry, I misheard. C,
Oh.
E, they sound the same. All right. Okay, so then we will be moving on to 6D, discussion and possible adoption of resolution number 2022-07, authorizing submittal of a notification of intent to comply to the Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery. Mr. Bartz.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. We'll be taking this item
All
also.
right.
Okay, as you're aware, Cal Recycle has adopted regulatory requirements consistent with the mandate of SB 1383. So we colloquially refer to that as SB 1383 here. These are designed to achieve the organic waste reduction goals established in Health and Safety Code with a 75% reduction in the level of statewide disposal of organic waste from the 2014 level by 2025. The regulations created to reduce organic waste consists of various components, including providing an organic recycling service to all residential and commercial properties, establishing an edible food recovery program, meeting procurement requirements, tracking third-party organic waste haulers, creating education and outreach material, and conducting inspection and enforcement activities. So this is a lot of stuff we need to get done. Which should have been done by January 1, 2022. But Senate Bill 619 was passed, and that is allowing Cal Recycle to review if we're eligible for an extension for compliance in order to, excuse me, avoid financial penalties of up to $10,000 per day. Yes, and so attached, we do have the resolution. It is a template from Cal Recycle that we filled in. I did consult with other solid waste managers throughout the region to see how they were filling out this exhibit because it was a little unwieldy when I first went through it. And so I did model a lot of what we did off of their example. Basically, COVID-19 has definitely impacted the district's efforts to comply with this. As our hauler, Brent Spears, has said, It's very difficult to get trucks, truck parts, employees, containers, and we're very unique. We're not like a city where there's already 3 levels of residential service that everybody has. About half of our customers have no form of trash service at all. And of those that do have subscription-based trash service, they only have the trash barrel. And so now we're going to be asking all of our residents to have 3 levels of service. That is a lot of barrels that we have to get. And us and every other agency in the state are also having to get barrels because all of the barrels have to be the same color. There is time to comply with that portion of it, but essentially this resolution will be submitted electronically to Cal Recycle, and they'll review it and get back to us and let us know if this compliance plan and timeline are sufficient. This is one of the components outlined in Exhibit B on page 59 of the packet. And we're currently in progress on several of these other items. So we did just adopt our franchise agreement, which was necessary. And tonight you can see on the February column, our resolution of intent to comply with SB 1383. And with that, staff recommends that the board adopt resolution number 2022-07, authorizing submittal of a notification of intent to comply to the Department of Resources Recycling and Recovery, AKA Cal Recycle.
Thank you. In your opinion, is there any chance that they're not going to approve this?
Based on the sheer number of my colleagues that are submitting these, I don't know. I mean, it would be really hard to say no to every agency that's experiencing a very similar problem. And ours is a little bit more compounded, like I said, because we don't have uniform service already.
Right. Thank you. All right. Deborah, do you have any questions?
Nope.
Mark?
No.
Kathy? Charlie, any questions?
No, I just wanted to thank Mr. Spears and especially Ms. Ward for all the work they did in getting all this stuff ready. Appreciate the effort. Thank you.
All right. If there are no further questions, can I get a motion?
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
All right. Motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the motion passes. Thank you. All right, moving on to 6E, discussion and possible action regarding district committee minutes and reports. Mr. Bartz?
Thank you, Madam President. This is going to be the last one I ask Ms. Board to take tonight.
Okay, hello again. So back a long time ago, some of you may remember that the board adopted action minutes for the district's board and committee meetings, and that coincided with the ability for us to post our recordings online. Additionally, at that time, we had what we kind of refer to as discussion or summary minutes, and they were very time consuming with the board that we had at the time. And we did a pretty in-depth analysis at that time that I put into the packet. I do believe this was the first presentation I ever did for the district. And basically we identified that really the discussion at the time was if you had a concern about something, you could always ask for the recording, or you could go to the staff member. And we did kind of change the format of the minutes at the time to say, you know, who introduced the item or who discussed it or who presented a report. So that way, if you had a question, you could go directly to that staff member if you didn't attend the meeting or couldn't listen to the recording. And now that we are streaming live and on YouTube and, you know, there's just easier participation, it seems, in my opinion, that action minutes will continue to be very useful for the district and sufficient for recording what happens at our meetings without getting too cumbersome or burdensome on staff. And so with that, the staff recommendation is for the board to continue to allow staff to utilize action minutes for district committee meetings. I did spend some time in our website diving deep into it just to see what is the activity on our agendas and minutes page. So for the 30-day period that I had access to that data, there were 46 unique hits on the agendas and minutes page. I'm going to tell you 4 of those were probably mine from my different devices. A couple from my assistant, a couple from the general manager, from the board. I know a lot of our staff use our packet, so there's just not a lot of unique activity to that page. And that being said, just because they go to that page, that doesn't mean they're actually clicking on and viewing anything with minutes. I imagine a lot of it is clicking on the agenda for the link to meetings. So I don't know. And in my humble opinion, it just seems like action minutes are filling the needs of the community at this time. So thank you.
Thank you. I know for myself, I had a couple of questions when I knew this agenda item was going to be here, and you answered them by including the website visits before I even had to ask the questions. And then I myself had a question when I saw the minutes from the engineering committee. So I went back and I watched the video from the engineering committee. I just fast forwarded to Sean's presentation, got the answer to the question, and I was in and out. So I am thankful for the opportunity to have, the online availability. So, any questions, Kathy?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say that I like it the way it is, because otherwise it would take way too much time for staff. You don't have.
Right. Mark, any questions or comments?
Just my preference is to try to limit staff time.
Okay, Deborah?
I agree with the other comments. Also, will we be having a link to the YouTube feeds on the agenda page as well at some point?
Yeah, so now that I believe our test phase is done, there will be a dedicated link to access our YouTube page. And then also, we're working on the backlog of recordings to upload to the website now that we're on YouTube and it's working very well. It's very easy to link to these recordings now. And so I do know there was a little while where they weren't readily available, but you could always call me and I'll send you whatever you need.
Awesome. That's all I wanted to know. Is how, if we'd at some point have YouTube linked at the same time to everything.
That was a very good question. Thank you. And Charlie, any comments or questions?
Yes, please. Well, since I'm the troublemaker that brought this up in the first place, I never wanted to go back to discussion minutes. Action minutes are fine. So if there was a misunderstanding in something I said to staff, I apologize. I think the action minutes are fine. My concern was, and I will tell you that in looking at the minutes for the last several months, the minutes for the committee meetings are much improved in that in the way back in history, it would say somebody made one of the staff members made a report, but there was no report included in the minutes. That's changed. There are now in the engineering committee, especially as it was brought up, Mr. Wright and Mr. Bartz always put information in there, as does Mr. Lawrence for the Park and Rec. So, those reports are really important because that's what tells us what's going on. The question I posed at the last board meeting really had a little bit different flavor to my thought. Was in our roles and responsibility comments for each one of the committees, it says that we make a quarterly report, in the case of engineering, monthly report to the board. And without exception, I think, the committees have deferred to the minutes as to be that report. And my only question was, is that sufficient as a quarterly report to the board? And apparently I'm in the minority here, so I defer to the majority. I had made a comment before when we talk about these quarterly reports that during a course of 3 months, things happen. And if those things are recorded in the minutes, then the minutes are sufficient. That's fine. But I made a comment at the last meeting, and I had some pushback from my colleagues about putting in tasks and was that task achieved, and and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to just back off of all of that and say, look, as long as the minutes are as they are now, and they're action minutes, which is fine, and as long as when the staff or somebody on staff makes a report that it's written into the minutes, then I'm just happy as a duck in water with that. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Roden, you said you had a question or comment on 6E?
Yes, I'm opening up here. Yes. I also support the action minutes. I can remember telling one of your predecessors years ago, why are you guys writing everything down? And I don't think that was the purpose of what Director Johnson said last week. But what I would add to that is that it should be the policy to delineate any changes to the staff recommendations that are made in the motion. And an example of that is the October 6th minutes when you approve the water rates. It reads that the rates as proposed were approved as amended, but the amendments are not delineated. And I think your policy, and that's not a staff fault, that's a policy fault. I think it's important that any changes or amendments that are included in the motion should be formally memorialized within your minutes. So that's one suggestion. Another suggestion is I think it's wonderful that you send out the board packets and email. I'm signed up for that, obviously, and get them. You might consider putting those on your Facebook page because you have over 1,300 people that follow the Facebook page, and that would help get out more about what you're doing into the community. I understand, if I understood correctly, you're going to be putting a link up for the new YouTube. I already viewed it. It's great. I think that's terrific. And my other comments really go to how the committees themselves integrate with the board. And I think what I'm going to do in that regard, rather than going on at length tonight, is write something up because it's probably appropriately to be considered within your budget consideration deliberations and one of the workshops when you're looking at how you assign staff, et cetera, within the budget itself. So that's my comment.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, may I get a motion, please?
I'll move approval of the item.
I'll second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion to continue to utilize action minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion passes. All right, moving on to 6F, update on the proposed Civic Center and Park expansion project. Mr. Bartz?
Thank you.
You're going to take this one?
George is going to take this one. I'm going to pass it around tonight.
Sure, I'll take it. Could you hear me? Yeah, there we go. Just some project updates on the Civic Center. We are working on the easements for Van Dam property, the both grading and the ingress easements. Legal has that in hand for review. The CEQA draft is in with the county for comments. We should have a response back here in the next couple of weeks on that. The final grading plan submittal is due at the end of the week. There was a lot that was required as far as title reports and documentations, as well as the minor corrections that were requested from the county, as well as the coordination with the consultant with Edison and their planner. There's some work to be done now that we have a design plan with loads and everything from the electrical engineer. That's with the Civic Center. As for the park, at the last board meeting, staff was directed to move forward with the proposal for the submittal for the CUP for the park. That's the 14-acre project. Contacted K2A. They're going to be the lead on this. They're working with the sub-consultants for their fees. That's with TRLS Engineering, as well as Steno, who's has a close relationship with the county. They're also working with other consultants to assist in the CEQA strategies, county reviews, and other development planning strategies. We should have a meeting here, hopefully this week, maybe tomorrow, no later than Friday, to kind of discuss what they've come up with. We're going to follow up with Stino and the engineer as well to kind of get that pushed along. And Merle Johnson, they're working on the geotechnical infiltration seepage for the 14-acre parcel. That should be completed by the end of April. I mean, I kind of get into the details of our projects, but I just don't like to leave anything out. Sorry.
Thank you for being
There's any
here.
questions?
Any questions from any of the board?
No.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to 6G, update on the status of negotiations for the consolidation of Sheep Creek Mutual Water Company into the district. Mr. Bartz.
Thank you. I'm just going to give a brief overview. And one of the things we're looking at right now is putting together some information for the public, not only for our customers, but the Sheep Creek customers and everybody in the community on what is being proposed for this consolidation and how it would affect users, whether it be our users or Sheep Creek users, looking at a comparison of rates and really how much money the state is willing to put out towards this project. As of right now, there's approximately $12 million that is being proposed to the state for grants, which would include well rehabs, new wells, tank rehabs, fire flow. They're looking at that for the downtown areas of Phelan. I think that ticket item alone is about over, I think it was $3.8 million for new lines to be able to be put in the downtown. I know one of the issues that people have run into in the past for development was fire flow. You know, it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to extend an already undersized line to the property which was going to be developed. And what's being proposed with the state is that they would increase fire flows throughout areas of the districts, with the downtown being one big part of that, which would be great. The attorney is working on the water rights portion of that. The water rights have been affirmed. In the attorney's opinion, this was an attorney hired by the state to look at the water rights. And they are also looking at whether the state will fund the purchase of the shares and the water rights. They're kind of tied together in the process. The information that I have from the attorney is that they really couldn't separate the water rights out from the rest of the district. It kind of comes as a package, and the state is looking at what portion of that they would pay for, if they would actually buy out the water rights or the shareholders for Sheep Creek. That is expected to take about 3 to 4 months. I think we're probably working on 3.5 months right now before we get an answer back on that. So that is a big portion of this. But we should have some answers fairly soon. And I think that is probably the most outstanding issue at this point. There's a lot of offsets that would be good for both districts, whether it be fire flow, storage capacities, well capacities. And we think the report is looking very positive for everybody in the community. So probably by the next board meeting, we would have more information that we can put out, talking about where we're at in the process and getting that out to the community. I believe that the community should be involved in this process and for it to be transparent. One of the things we said from the very beginning was we would like this process to be just right out there on the table. Everybody could look at it. People could ask questions that we could hopefully answer. If not, we could get the answers. And we are moving forward with this.
All right. Do any of the board members have any questions? Mark? No? Deborah? Charlie?
No.
No? All right. Thank you very much. All right. So we're moving on to number 7, committee reports. Antelope Valley adjudication, nothing. Engineering.
There are minutes in the packet. I believe probably the two most discussed issues were the pipeline breaks, and then second was whether to increase the pace of the meter exchange. And I don't think there was anything that was critical.
Right. And you did say that you were going to be bringing that back to the committee again?
That'll be coming to the board workshop next Wednesday.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Finance Committee.
Nothing new. We already.
Didn't meet.
What?
We didn't meet yet.
No, it was, last report was already in the package.
All right. Legislative Committee.
We meet tomorrow.
All right. And Park and Rec. Nothing new on that one. And Waste and Recycling.
Nothing new on that one.
All right. Staff and General Managers Report. Mr. Bartz.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Seems like there's a lot going on in the waste and recycling.
Yeah. Everything keeps coming into the board packets.
Okay.
Nothing new to add besides what's already in the board packets.
It's going to get even more fun in about a year.
Yeah. All right. Anything to add to the Staff and General Managers Report?
I have nothing to add to the report.
Does anyone have any questions on that?
I just that I forgot that there was a sheet that I assume you furnished for the packet about the increased meter in the installation. So
Correct, on page 85.
yeah.
All right. So we will move on to number 9, Directors Reports. Charlie, we'll start with you.
Nothing to report.
All right. Kathy?
Nothing to report.
Mark?
I have nothing additional.
Deborah?
Same here, nothing additional.
All right. And I had reported on my ASBCSD meeting before, but my notes are in the packet if you wanted to read them. And then also the information from the tax collector's office. Number 10, correspondence and information. Ms. Ward, is there anything additional?
So nothing new other than what's in the packet. We are working on, and I have good news, and that will be going out in the bills soon. We are going to have a tire day finally. So in April.
All right.
It'll coincide with our cleanup. So be on the lookout for that information.
All right. Anyone have any questions on any of that? Nope. You're good?
I would just like to comment that we have the 2022 community teaching garden classes in here, and we do have some dignitaries in the audience tonight who do teach those classes. Thank you. They've been very successful. We would like to thank them for that.
Thank you for joining us this evening. All right. Moving on to number 11, review of action items. Did we have any prior meeting action items?
Yeah, staff is looking into an analysis on the dead ends in the system, and I believe there'll be a report in the near future.
All right. And were there any current meeting action items?
I have recorded none.
All right. So then moving on to number 12, set agenda for next meeting.
So just a reminder, we do have a budget workshop next Wednesday at 4 p.m. We'll be reviewing our CIPs. We'll also be amending for your approval the item we had for the ballot measure based off of the survey results. So we'll have an item to discuss that, and then also the meter replacement program as well.
Okay. Do any members of the board have any items they would like to add to the agenda?
No.
All right. So we will now recess to close session at 7:14 p.m.